What's going on, everybody? How are you? I'm so excited to be hanging out with you today. My name is James Robilotta. We've probably kicked it before, and if so, welcome back. If we haven't, I'm super excited to be with you here. Thank you so much. We do these every Thursday, pretty much, since the start of quarantine. I think we've missed two. So that ain't bad, folks. but it's been super awesome just to build community and get to know so many cool people from around the country that work in so many different fields. And I love it. So thank you so much for coming through. Today we're talking about feedback. That's a fun topic. But it's also super important. It's also super important. You know, I went home last week. I went home back to New York. I live in Minneapolis. Went back to New York last week, unfortunately, because I had a funeral to attend. But the funeral was beautiful, and I missed my family a lot, so I decided to stay for the entire week. And it's always interesting whenever you're around your family, because I think families give us feedback in a pretty unique way that only families can, right? I think there's a bluntness to it, there's a coldness to it, or sometimes if you're like my family, my family speaks fluent passive aggression, so that's awesome. It's great to, language can be taught, and that's where I learned the language of passive aggression as well. So, but it was so funny to be back in that environment. And also, especially just to be back in New York after I've lived in Minnesota for about a year and a month. And so I'm still a newbie out here. I've only been to like 2 of the 10,000 lakes, but we're slowly checking them off. But it's funny because here in the Midwest, people don't speak as directly, right? Like if there is a merge on the highway and people know that the merge is happening, people are moving over way early into the lane that's going to pass through. Versus me, I'm the guy who goes all the way up that left lane and then ducks in at the end because welcome to New York, folks. All right. So they are indeed Minnesota nice, Gary, for sure. But so it's just so funny. There's just this, there's a level of indirectness that happens out here. But as soon as I got back to New York and we walked into our favorite deli that we used to live right around the corner from this spot in Brooklyn, and they knew us but never gave us the total acknowledgement. Like they never wanted to know our name, but they kind of started to know our order. It was just enough that it's like, I think we're almost friends and that feels cool. But still, we walked in there like we had never been there before in our lives, and they're like, "What do you want? You want seasoned dressing on a sandwich? All right, whatever. Yeah, sure, whatever." And like it's just like. Just the directness was so delightful at times, and just listening to the way that people are ordering pizzas, like who's next? Over here. What do you want? Okay, over there. Okay, what do you need? Okay, yeah, okay, great. It was lovely. It was really lovely. The funeral parlor director was like, "Nah, you're not. Listen, step away from the casket. You're doing a Paul Bear thing all wrong." It's like I'm mourning my uncle right now. I'm sorry, I'm not the perfect Paul Bear. But there was just a delightful directness to it all. And it got me thinking about feedback, which is such a fascinating topic. A fascinating topic because it's something that we all know is helpful. We all typically like to get it ourselves, but we're not always the best at giving it. We're also not sometimes the best at receiving it, but today we're focusing on giving feedback, not necessarily receiving feedback. So let's share this screen here, and let's jump in. Do me a favor, if you can see my screen right now. Do you see my PowerPoint? Give me a thumbs up. If so, you probably don't yet. Let me see if you see it. Can you see it now? Boom, there we go. Okay, perfect. Still learning old Google Slides. So let's talk a little bit about feedback. First off, for those of you that are new here, my name is James Robilotta. I'm super excited to be here. As you've already learned, I'm a proud New Yorker. I'm a professional speaker. I travel around the country and talk to companies and colleges when I was allowed to do that. Now I just do it virtually. I teach individuals about life and leadership. I'm also a coach, and in many ways. and I wrote a book called Leading Imperfectly. It's right here behind me. The movies taught me how to do product placement. But I wrote a book called Leading Imperfectly. It's about the role that authenticity and vulnerability must play in leadership. I'm also an improv comedian. I started a company called North Coast, and we perform around the world. Again, when we were allowed to do that, we do improv all around the country as well. We infuse hip hop into improv comedy. It's a great time. And for those of you that already know, but those of you that don't, I dislocated my right knee in my senior prom dancing to Shania Twain's Man, I Feel Like a Woman. Yes. Yes. All right. I start that way because I believe we can laugh and learn at the same time. And there's a lot of honesty that has to happen in feedback. And that honesty goes both ways. But feedback is scary. It's scary because a lot of us, I think most of us enjoy being liked. Most of us enjoy being liked. We're not necessarily always chasing it, but like it's nice to be. I'd rather be liked than hated. I don't know where you fall on that spectrum. I know some of y'all are like, whatever, I'm gonna do me. Good for you. I'm not quite there, but I think for me, I enjoy being liked, and so feedback is always tough because sometimes I don't want to give it because I don't want to tarnish the relationship. If you were in my love and leadership session that I did about a month ago, we talked about this supervision spectrum and where do you fall on the supervision spectrum. I always fell more towards the side of friendship, just because I needed people to like me, and I thought that that's where I could build relationships and that's where I could truly spark change, as opposed to being just a true manager on the other side that only cared about results and didn't care about team dynamics. But when it comes to feedback, it's super important. And this is something that I've gotten better at over time of supervising individuals. So in order to talk about feedback, I want to know where you all are. So I came up with a bit of a feedback spectrum, if you will. And the 5 points on this feedback spectrum are football coach, police officer. I meant to change that. It's not police officer anymore because you just can't talk about police officers right now. Lazy doctor is now the police officer one. You'll come back to that. I wrote it right in the other slides. And a Midwest in-law, stuffed animal, and Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. All right. So let's talk through these. And I'm curious to see where you fall on the spectrum. Each one of these is a different type of individual when it comes to giving feedback. So first off, let's talk about football coaches. Now, I'm talking about the cliche Vince Lombardi football coach, like the one that when someone says football coach, it's kind of that immediate archetype that pops into your head. When these individuals give feedback, they do it in an aggressive manner. Right? They're usually they do it in an aggressive manner. Sometimes it's condescending, but often it's very aggressive. A lot of yelling and things like that. They're very demanding in the way that they expect things to happen. It's their way or the highway, nothing else. Right? They're managing a huge team of people, and so they figured out the only way to do that is by flexing power, and that way everybody just kind of falls in line. They also don't allow for excuses. They don't want to hear your stories. They don't want to hear what happened to you last week, what happened to you last night. They don't care where you were raised and how you were brought up or anything like that. They just care about getting it done. They often use competition and ranking to try to motivate others. They don't really necessarily try to figure out what motivates you. They immediately start to pit people against each other. And so they use competition as a way to do that. So-and-so runs faster, they catch better than you. They're going to start before you, those kind of things. Football coaches are only interested in results. They're only interested in results. And so that is one type of, I'm really trying to figure out. Okay, here we go. There we go. Perfect. That is one type of individual on the feedback spectrum. Next are the lazy doctors. The lazy doctors. So when I say the lazy doctor, I don't know how many of you have ever had a lazy doctor, but the lazy doctor is the kind of individual that, this is often, some of my doctors have been this way, where I go in there, I spend some time, and they just kind of start saying like, you could probably exercise, you could probably do this. And it's always very, the way that they bring it up is always in like a slightly condescending tone, right? It's like, like exercising is a thing you could do. That's like a way, like if you notice where you fall on the obese chart, okay, exercising is what moves you back to the one side, right? That kind of stuff. The way that they talk to you is a little bit condescending. Why does this sometimes work and sometimes not? I don't know. But they're always just a little bit air of condescending. They often ask obvious and insulting questions. I don't know. Sometimes I also know a lot of parents that do this as well, where they ask a lot of obvious and sometimes insulting questions to their kids. They're like, "Is that what you meant to do? Was that the right choice right now?" Right? Like those kind of questions that people ask, where they're not meant to spark learning. They're meant to spark like almost shame, other than anything else. And that's why they try to belittle to spark that change. They try to belittle you to try to get you in. Like they often use shame as a motivator, but shame doesn't motivate you to change. Shame only motivates you to feel more shameful, typically. So it doesn't ever really work. And often the conversation is about them because it's about their knowledge. It's about where they have been and how they have overcome and how they have earned this position. They have done all the schooling. They have all this. Please take out all of my degrees over here. Right? Like things like that. The conversation is about them, and they want you to know that they are smart and you are not. I don't know if you've ever had a supervisor like that. I have definitely had a supervisor like that. I used to say that her hindsight was 20/20. It was incredible. Like if the Air Force cared about hindsight, she would have gotten in. But the Air Force doesn't care about hindsight. But like the way that she spoke to you was very much like, well, why did you do this? You should have done that. Why did you? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. Well, I probably would have done it this way. It's like, I just told you about the whole event that I was planning for the past 3 weeks. You waited for the event to happen, and now you're coming in with well, you should have done it this way. Where was that in our prior meetings, right? It was just that moment of like, well, I would have done it this way because, I'm brilliant. So anyway, not everybody is. That kind of individual, the lazy doctor. Then we have the Midwest in-law. The Midwest in-law. This is one that I've garnered since moving to the Midwest. I love doing the holidays with my partner's parents. They are a great time. And her aunts and her uncles. It's always fun. They often do some sort of a gift exchange. They have kind of a big family. So instead of, sometimes they'll do the white elephant thing, but sometimes it's like Secret Santa type stuff around Christmas, which we celebrate. And so it's always fascinating because especially whenever anybody is doing the Secret Santa type thing, they never let the other individual guess who gave them the gift because they always give it away. Because as soon as you start opening a gift, someone from across the room starts saying, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. You're probably not going to like it. I don't even know if it's your size. I probably didn't even do it right. I don't even think that's your color. I don't even know if you're going to, I'm not even sure if you like soft things. But like, just so you know, like the gift receipt's in there. It's great. Meanwhile, I've pulled one piece of tape off of the wrapping paper at this point, but they came in strong with the apologies, my friends. And so they are super apologetic. They are super apologetic. They are overly cautious and very indirect, right? It's like, well, if you wanted to change, I guess you could maybe, potentially you could do something like this, but if that's not really for you, like that's okay. Don't worry about it. They're superly cautious. Everything is eggshells with them. And you feel like you never really get a direct answer out of them. So you never really know if you're making them happy or not, but you kind of have this idea that they're talking shit about you behind the scenes. Right? It's kind of like we have phrases like this all around the country, right? In the South, we have bless your heart. Oh, bless your heart, you tried, right? And in the Northeast, we have not for nothing, but, or hey, no disrespect, but like that kind of thing, where it's like this like little preface that we have. In the Midwest, I once heard a stand-up comedian that said, you could never win a fight with a Minnesotan because you can punch them in the face all day and they'll just keep apologizing. So... So overly cautious. And they want you to know that they care a lot. They want you to know that they care a lot. And by this, not by this, what I'm not saying is that they care a lot, but they want you to know that they like I am the person who cares for you. They want you to know that they are the person that has you, that they're holding you, they're protecting you, that kind of individual. When they do finally decide to teach, they often use passive aggression and guilt to teach, right? My partner's grandmother is a primary example of this. We have a lovely dog. Her name's Sherry. She's over here licking herself right now, and that's NSFW. So I'm not going to show you that right now, but still, it's funny because my grandmother-in-law would love to take Sherry off of our hands. And she loves to use our heavy, back in the day, travel schedule all the time. And so it's always like, whenever we would go and pick her up from Grammy's house, it would always be like, I think Sherry just felt a lot happier here. I think she just really loved having, someone here all the time. It's got to be, do you think it's hard for her than knowing that you're gone all the time? It's got to be hard, right? And it's just like, it's said in this extremely sweet, like, she's got to be so hard. And she says it in this beautiful grandmother tone that sounds like love if you don't hear the words. But we often use this passive aggression to them. And that's because they often want to be liked. That's the first impetus, right? The first impetus is, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want anything. I want to be liked. And so I'm going to just tiptoe into the conversation. I don't know if any of y'all have some Midwest in-laws. If you can confirm with that, let me know in the chat if what I just said about them is relatively accurate. And then we have the stuffed animals. Fun fact about me, growing up, I used to have about 30 stuffed animals, and I used to set them up in like stadium seating fashion on my bed and have conversations with them. So turns out I've always liked a crowd. That's a fun fact about me. I had my favorite one. I had two favorite ones. One name was Mimi. Mimi was a koala. And then I had Schmedley the walrus. That's just a good name. So here's how stuffed animals are when they give feedback. First off, they're silent. Excuse me, they are silent. They're not offering anything, right? Or they're not even entertaining conversations, really. They're always smiling, right? Everything seems to be always perfectly fine. Everything is totally good. There's nothing ever wrong. And so why would we ever bring up anything that would potentially could be wrong, right? So let's not even bother. Let's just keep smiling. We just want everybody to be comfortable. That's what we need here. All right? They are completely non-confrontational. This is also when you approach them with confrontation, they are also very quick to dismiss it, diffuse it, and or ignore it or change the subject. And so not completely non-confrontational because everything is always good. We're good. Everything's good. Everything's fine, right? It's a little frustrating / very frustrating because you're like, are we moving? Are we growing? Are we doing anything? Do you care? Do you also kind of like the Midwest in-law? Do you just talk shit about me when I'm not here? I'm like, what is going on behind your head, right? These are the individuals that care only about harmony. They care only about harmony. They care about team dynamics, but only from a place where team dynamics is only about so that everybody likes each other and everybody gets along. There's no fights at the water cooler, right? Like that kind of thing. No one's sending judgy emails. They just want everybody to be totally happy and fine. These are the individuals and the conversations that we're having in this world right now that only care about inclusion and don't care about justice. Right? If everybody's like, let's just all get along. I don't even see color, right? Like those kind of individuals, as opposed to caring about justice, which involves changing systems, a little bit of confrontation, positive confrontation for change. So all of those lead us to this last one. to this last one, which is actually right in the middle of the spectrum, but you can't build up to that. So Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting. Good Will Hunting is in my top 3 favorite movies of all time. What are the other 2, you ask? A Bronx Tale and Shawshank. And Finding Nemo is also up there because I'm a marine biologist. So, but Good Will Hunting is one of my favorite movies of all time. If you have not seen the movie Good Will Hunting, I can't encourage you to see it enough. It's just an incredible piece of theater. The acting is outrageous, and Robin Williams is one of my heroes. I absolutely adore this man. And I was somebody who always came up, as you can tell, I'm a large character, right? Like I got the gestures, I'm doing all the voices over here, right? Like I'm large, I'm out here. And so that's also what we know Robin Williams, right? Think of the Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire, the genie in Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire, toys, like some of these ridiculous roles that he played. And so even what he played in Hook, right? But there was this moment where Robin Williams got to play a very different character in Good Will Hunting to really flex his range. And I love that because growing up, I did a lot of theater and I was only ever given the ridiculous parts, like the big comedic character-driven parts. I was never given any serious parts because no one ever thought that I could do it. They're just like, nah, they kind of typecasted me. Watching Robin Williams in this movie did a lot for me in that way also. But his character, Sean, is a psychologist if you haven't seen the movie. But the way that he gives feedback in this movie, I absolutely love and try to emulate. And I think a lot of us can take some notes from it. So first off, if you are giving feedback like a Robin Williams character in Good Will Hunting, that means you're assertive. That means that you are not shying away from what is happening, but you're also not completely attacking it and hitting it over the head in an aggressive mashing. That's manner and fashion put together, in case you're wondering. Also, Robin Williams is very vulnerable in that, right? There's the incredible story of when he's sitting on the park bench and he's talking about how he lost his wife, and some of those moments where he's teaching with vulnerability. There's power in teaching with your own story when we give feedback. Sometimes we forget about us when we're giving feedback to others, when we are in fact a great conduit for lessons. He's also an incredible listener. The way that he actually listened to this individual and practiced patience with Matt Damon's character was incredible. And also, he lets the fish run with the line. And what that means is that, for those of you who have been fishing before, you know that as soon as you get a fish on, especially if it's a larger fish, you don't immediately start reeling because you need that fish to tire itself out a little bit. So you let the fish run with the line for a while because it's freaking out, it's going to get tired, and then eventually you'll be able to bring it back in. This is a little weird to talk about humans in this way, but stick with me. But still, letting individuals vent is really important. Letting individuals talk about, well, I thought these were the expectations. I thought this was the vision. This is how I interpreted X, Y, and Z. Those kind of things are important as opposed to just bringing somebody into the office and being like, you did this, you did that, let me bring you in here. No, it's important to let that individual have that conversation, okay? So letting them run with the line is very important because it allows that individual to feel heard. These individuals who give feedback in this way care about growth and team dynamics. They care about growth and team dynamics. So these are the 5 points. These are the 5 points in the feedback spectrum. This is the order that they come in from: completely aggressive on one side, and then all the way over to that stuffed animal who only wants peace and harmony, no confrontation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in some breakout groups. I'm going to put you in some breakout groups because I want you to talk about, where do you think you fall? Where do you fall on this feedback spectrum? All right. Again, the football coach, the lazy doctor, Robin Williams, Midwest in-law, stuffed animal. And I also want you to I'm going to have you talk about 2 things. Where do you think you fall on average? And the second question that I want you to think about, is when we deal with different types of people, we also fall at different places on the spectrum. Right? So not everybody, like we're not just always a lazy doctor. There's some people that we are a Midwest in-law with. There's some people that we're Robin Williams with. There's some people when we're whatever. And so what I want you to have a conversation with is what type of people bring different points of the spectrum out in you? A little bit of a break, and a little bit of a break. Well, it wasn't a break for me; it's breakouts for you. But one thing that I realized is that, and I was talking about Laura with this, is that one thing I didn't do was talk about some of the pros of some of those other individuals. I made it sound like there was only one right choice, and so first off, if you fall anywhere but Robin Williams, that doesn't mean you're a terrible person. Especially because, I mean, first off, different strokes for different folks. Some people enjoy being led a certain way. And there are pros to all of those other ones. And so I think that is important to recognize. And I've already actually gone in and started changing the PowerPoint so that the next time I do this session, I'm making sure that I'm listing some of those pros and cons of each feedback style. So that's just a quick moment of honesty with you all to know that this session can be better. And based on your head nods, you agree with me. So, and I appreciate that. So when we talk about this spectrum, the goal is to try to, more times than not, land on Robin Williams and Good Will Hunting. That is where we are trying to get, and that's also one of the cons to that one. One of the cons of that one is that it is tedious, right? It takes a little bit more time. There's teaching involved. It's not just, well, do this. It's not just, well, let me guilt you into this. And it's not just like, well, whatever you want to do. And it's not just, right? It's so there is teaching involved, there is time involved, and that's something that's difficult because not every situation do we have time. That's not always the case. So when we're thinking about this, when I think about feedback and the style of feedback that I try to emulate something that I call courageous feedback. And courageous feedback is this. This is how I think we get into that Robin Williams middle of the spectrum more often than not place. All right. So courageous feedback, what that looks like is inquiring before you instruct. A lot of you have heard me say ask before you advise before. Same idea. I just wanted to find another alliterative thing. But inquire before you instruct. So in other words, before you just jump into the lesson, jump into the feedback, jump into this needs to change, that needs to change, this is going fine, that kind of stuff, let us first ask a question. Let's first learn what they thought the expectations of them were, what they thought the instructions were, what they thought the goals were, what their interpretations of what was going on was. How did they see the bigger picture of what was happening? This is such a critical moment for all supervisors because it's in this moment that you start to learn the way that your people's brain works. And the way that they attack it, right? Are they someone who comes to things with like straight logic, or are they pipe dreamers, or are they whatever? Like, how do they approach different topics and things like that? By asking it, you're actively then listening to the way that their brain works. So that next time that you give a directive, or even later in this conversation when you provide some feedback, you now know how to do that. And you can pivot in the moment for how this person likes to receive things this way, or typically hears things this way. So let me try to serve it up on the right plate for them. That's a really important moment to start out a lot of feedback conversations. Sometimes they just come in, sit down, they slump in the chair, and then we let them have it. And that doesn't always work. Rarely works, actually. So also within that, finding rapport is crucial. When we have rapport with the people that we work with, everyone is immediately less defensive. When we have rapport, when that other individual knows that we care about them as a fellow human being, when we have care for them, when we have, when we know about their family, or we know what they like to do on weekends, or things like that, when we just have a little bit more knowledge, not all this crazy, deep personal stuff, but that we have cared about them as a whole human, when individuals do that for us, we are more likely to show up authentic for them, as opposed to showing up a little disingenuous, or showing up as like, this is who you probably want me to show up as, or let me show up as this facade. Instead, when we have that rapport, people show up a little bit more authentic, and therefore a little less defensive. Defensiveness is going to happen. Defensiveness is going to happen. As a matter of fact, I think it should happen, because if it doesn't, then that's also another defensive mechanism. If they're just like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I always do that wrong. Yeah, I'm stupid. Yeah, I'm this. Yeah, I'm that. Right? Like, that's another defensive mechanism that people use, and it doesn't work. So I would rather have you get a little defensive, because I'm calling you out on something. Right? Like, I want to know that you have a backbone. But when we have that rapport, that defensiveness doesn't spike, and the walls don't completely close us off from the rest of the conversation. So they allow more conversations to happen. Rapport is crucial. So how are you building rapport with your individuals now, so that when you have feedback conversations with them, you're not all of a sudden caring about how their sick mother's doing? Right? You have been caring. How are you building those rapport moments now, so that when it comes time to have this conversation, like, this person cared about me. This person cared about me. Maybe they still care about me. Maybe this is a conversation where they are going to care for me, because they want what's best for me while wanting what's best for the company, for the team, for the campus, those kind of things. That's why rapport is super important. It has to be done on the front end. Again, that's a little bit of the piece of time here in the Robin Williams feedback. And so ways to find rapport also in the moment is also for you to share a story. So when you're actually in the feedback conversation, what are places where you can share a story? A little story of, here's a time where I dropped the ball. Here's a time where I let somebody down. Here's a time where I misinterpreted what I thought was wanted of me and really missed the mark. And here's how it affected me. Here's how others felt around me. Here's what's going on. Share a little bit of that story, because this is how you lead with love and not with fear. Because if you try to lead with perfection, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. That causes people to clam up and close off. But instead, when we share with story, it leads with imperfection. And it's that idea of like, hey, we're all growing. In the conversations that we have, we use the word we and us. It's not I and you, those kind of things. It just hits a little bit different for individuals. So also when you share your story, don't make the whole feedback thing about you. It's about finding that balance. So there's that. Also, courageous feedback equals providing clarity. One thing that ruins almost every single relationship, and this is a relationship, supervisor, supervisee, best friend to best friend, partner to partner in relationships, et cetera, and families, is that we hold people accountable to expectations they didn't know we set for them. We hold people accountable to expectations that they didn't know we set for them, right? The classic case is always like the dishes in the sink. The dishes in the sink, and you didn't do them, and your partner didn't do them, and then they come back and like, you couldn't have done the dishes? It's like, well, did you want me to do the dishes? Was that an expectation of me to do the dishes? I'll do the dishes. Just ask me to do the dishes, right? Like those kind of moments are those kind of situations that are important. Now, when we don't do that, and then we just handle everything that we expected the other person to handle and didn't, that builds the wrong relationship. And so where can you provide clarity, especially right now, in the midst of quarantine, in the midst of COVID and all that kind of stuff? All of us just want a little clarity in the middle of the ambiguity. And so how can you provide some of that clarity? And sometimes that clarity is, I don't know the answer, right? Sometimes that clarity is, I don't know the exact way that I want this to be done, but I know that I want you to try. right? Like, I want you to apply your brain to this. And I will remember saying this so that when we have a conversation about if it's working or if it's not, I'm not going to make you feel like you're stupid. Instead, I'm going to be like, I love the way your brain was working on this. I just think it needs to go a slightly different direction. Providing clarity is super important. Also, involving them in their own growth plan. What this looks like is after you give them the feedback of like, here's some things that we could have done a little bit differently on that, or here's what I saw your intent was. Thank you for your intent. Here's what the actual impact was of what you said or what you did. And here's the ripple effect of what happened. After you share some of that feedback in a clear form, it's important to involve them in their growth plan. In other words, saying things like, where do you think we should go from here? What are great ways to help you? What are ways that I can help you stay motivated to continue to put in the work here, to continue to dream, to continue to meet these deadlines, things like that, trying to figure out what are their incentives. It's almost a little bit like learning their love language, kind of, because then the way that you can apply their feedback and show them appreciation and hold them accountable, is in a way that is meaningful to them. But it's them knowing what they need. And there's some people that are just going to be like, I just need you to tell me what to do. Just tell me this as clear as day as you can make it, right? Like, I think I've done that sometimes with Laura, even as Laura and I have been working together. There's been some times where she's like, just tell me exactly what you'd like to have happen right now, because that would be super helpful right now. Meanwhile, I'm over here like, no, I want you to use your brain. Let's dream together, Laura. What should we do? And she's like, that just doesn't work for every project, James. And I'm like, no, it does. No. So those moments are important. Involving them in their growth plan, asking them what do they need. And last but not least, don't also forget to compliment them. Right? And I know we talk about sandwiching compliments all the time, right? Good, bad, good. And yes, we're only ever going to remember the bad ones, but sometimes we do remember the good ones also. And so remembering to compliment them that not everything is wrong. Just because you didn't handle this one project perfectly doesn't mean that you are a failure and you're on the chopping block. One of the most powerful things that I've ever said to Tina is, I'm not going to leave you. Right? Like, it was one of the most powerful things. And we had gotten into a little bit of an argument, and it was one of our first arguments. And then also we've had some other big milestones and tough things that we've gone through in our relationship. And that was one of her biggest fears, was that I was going to leave her. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes the way that we give feedback doesn't also communicate love, doesn't also communicate respect, doesn't also communicate the fact that's like, I love so many things about you. There's just this one little thing that you need to work on because it's impacting the greater company, the greater campus, the greater team, those kind of things. Those moments are really important as well, but sometimes we forget about them. So this is what courageous feedback looks like in my book. And this is what I think, this is where Robin Williams fell in Good Will Hunting. And this is where I think we can fall as we try to get a little bit better at feedback. I would also say that this also works in an upward fashion as well, right? Where you're doing some upward managing. I think this is also something you can do. I would lean a little bit more on the asking questions side of things, but don't turn yourself into a cocky or lazy doctor. Don't ask condescending questions. But this is a way that you can start to try to manage up a little bit as well. Rapport still matters there. Clarity matters there, and things like that. So that's what I'll say there. Let me end this share right now. My friends, that's what I got for you that's what I got for you here today around feedback. These are the ways, these are some of the small steps that I think we can take. I'm going to throw a quick poll up here just to get your thoughts on it. I'm also just curious to see, since I wasn't in your breakout groups, where some of you feel like you fell more often than not on some of those things. If that poll has popped up for you, just shoot me a thumbs up. Great. Awesome. Yeah, let me know where you fall on some of those kind of things. No judgment. I'm not going to go back through and see who filled out what on the first question. I will for the other ones, and I'll judge you. No. So I appreciate you all coming to this session today. It has been awesome working with you. I don't know what you're doing with your teams right now, but if you're looking for someone to help you out virtually, I'd love to be a part of that. I've been doing a whole bunch of sessions for different types of companies and doing a lot of stuff with HR and management. American Express brought me in recently, and I'm also doing some really cool stuff for campuses and different colleges around the country as well. So if I can help you during these moments of uncertainty, please just let me know. And I appreciate you all so much for coming today. Y'all stay care, and I'll hang out. If anybody's got questions, I'll hang out here for a while on the Zoom like I always do, and feel free to hang out and ask some questions. But if you got a role, I respect it. Take care, y'all.